Welcome to Quills and Chills. I'm your host, Rick Clifton, and I'm going to introduce you to the creators who give fear its voice. Together, we'll explore the strange, the unsettling, and the unforgettable. So go ahead and dim those lights because that conversation starts now. Hello and welcome back to Quills and Chills. I am your host, Rick Clifton, and today I am joined by Cullen Bunn. Cullen is a New York Times best-selling writer and horror novelist, and he's here to talk about his latest book, Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World, where small-town dread meets an ancient terror. So, Cullen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I am very, very excited to talk about this book. I couldn't put it down. I really loved it. But first of all, I just got to have you tell us a little bit about what this book is about.
So, Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World it's a book about a killer in a small North Carolina coastal town who is brutally murdering residents and harvesting organs. And as the townsfolk try to figure out who this is and try to survive this killer, they find that the murder spree has a much more sinister purpose, and the story gets more horrific than they could have ever imagined.
All right, so you brought it up. I have to ask this one of my questions. It's a small North Carolina town. That's because you are from North Carolina?
So I grew up in North Carolina, and my dad used to take us fishing all the time to this town that is very much like Wilson Island. So I spent a lot of time as a kid on the real version of Wilson Island.
I love it. So where is that? Because I'm actually from North Carolina. I grew up in just outside of Mount Airy, North Carolina. So
Sure.
I'm kind of curious where this is.
We used to go fishing. We always went to a place called Harker's Island, which I have not visited since I was, a teenager. But we used to go fishing there, and I intentionally did not want to revisit Harker's Island. I wanted to remember the Harker's Island of my youth because I know it's changed. Although I did a little bit of internet research, and it hasn't changed as much as you would think. So,
well, for somebody that goes back to North Carolina once or twice a year, I feel that, and like sometimes you don't want to go back to the places that you kind of remember because you love sort of how they sit in your brain, but also they don't change. So
yeah.
it's like, my hometown hasn't changed that much other than a few buildings no longer there and things like that. But
right.
We have a few more gas stations and banks and stuff. So.
Yeah. A McDonald's or a fast food restaurant that wasn't there in our youth.
Starbucks is the big one for
yeah, of course.
So there's one and everybody goes, and I'm like, I just can't sit here and wait 45 minutes for a coffee. It's just not gonna happen.
Right.
All right, so we have to talk about one thing here. That first chapter, holy shit. I mean, I gotta tell you, it's something I want to sort of talk about too in character building, but I just want to talk a little bit about that first chapter first. It's such a bold move. I mean, pardon the pun here a little bit. I'm trying to be spoiler free, but it kind of grabs you by the throat, right away. I mean, so I was wondering if you could sort of talk me through a little bit how it came to be and what made you decide that was the moment to start this story, because damn, it's a great one.
Well, it really was. A lot of writers write, they jump around the books as they're working on it. That was those were the very first words I wrote for this novel, even before there was an outline for the book. That chapter was really the very first thing for the book, and then later I went back and I outlined it because I had this idea of how I wanted it to start, and it really is, in a lot of ways, it's representative of sort of how I approach the book as a whole, because I wanted to introduce this character. I wanted him to have I wanted to paint a picture of his life. I wanted to show who he was. And then what happens to him happens.
Well, and that's a perfect segue to my next question, is about character building, because you do this like not just with that character, but you do this multiple times throughout the story. It's sort of I equate it to you make us fall for your characters, right? We're all in. We're like, oh my God. And, you know, I thought I knew sort of, I was getting an introduction to this. And then right before that, you get us attached so fast. And then suddenly you're just ripping off that Band-Aid, I guess. And I'm just like, I love it. So I was wondering if we could talk about sort of about character building and why you love to do that and why you feel like it's effective.
Well, I kind of set myself a high bar for this book, and I kind of challenged myself with it. Maybe in a way, looking back, I probably shouldn't have done it. I probably should have tried something different.
No, you did great. I love it.
But,
It's my favorite part of the story.
But I love the idea of creating all these characters, and even characters who you only encounter for a relatively short time. I wanted them to feel real. I wanted them to have quirks and histories that you could relate to. Because one of the things, you know, I always think about with novels is, with a horror novel, is you don't have a jump scare, right? You don't have a soundtrack that's playing to sort of set the mood and the tone. So what you can really be worried about, what you can be scared for, are the characters. And I really just wanted to do something that would hook the reader on an emotional level with the characters, whether they like the character or hate the character. I wanted to be able to hook them with, in some cases, something very small.
Yeah. And I think that bar was perfectly said. I don't think you need to, you know, you did great with it. I would not have changed a thing. I think the way you've done this is fantastic. One of the things I really loved is how you sort of approach the final moments for characters and how introspective it becomes. So we're actually experiencing it from their point of view and not like my point of view. So I'm not watching it happen. I'm experiencing it with them. And I know I'm being a little vague, but I know you got to know what I'm talking about. But
Yes.
it's just some of those final moments, man. I'm like, it's powerful. It really is, man.
Well, it's, you know, I think as you get older, as I get older anyway, I think a lot about mortality. And some days I think about it a little more than others. And lately those days seem to be more frequent than they used to be. Right. But I like to think that at the end, whenever that comes, I'm going to have I'm going to have these moments, and maybe that moment stretches where I get to consider what this means, and where I'm, where I am at that time. Nobody knows when when that time's going to be. But I do like, I take some comfort in thinking that I'll get that moment of, okay.
Yeah,
there we go.
Right. So
right.
that moment where clarity, where everything just kind of, makes sense. So,
and I really, I think it's in the case of this novel, and the way so many people are going out, it's a little darker, and it makes it a little more sinister, and hopefully gives us a little more of a chill.
Mission accomplished. It certainly did. So I want to come back and talk about, I know we talked a little bit about it in the beginning, but I want to talk a little bit about Wilson Island itself, and the fact that it starts out as sort of this sort of small town, grounded, vacation place, if you will. But then it becomes something that's sort of more critical, more larger, and more, I don't want to say that because I think that might give things away. But anyway, it just becomes sort of very important in the story. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about blending some of those sort of smaller, intimate moments along with this epicness about where the story comes together. I mean, it's really does collide in such a great way.
Yeah, Wilson Island is as much a character in the book as anybody, as any of the characters. And I wanted it to feel real, and I wanted it to feel small, and so there's a lot of details that I weave through the story, that I spend a little bit of time on, with what the mailboxes look like on this street, or the sign outside the coffee shop, or things like that, because those are details that to me help to cement the setting and make it feel more real. But as we go along, Wilson Island takes a little bit of a different tone, because the characters who live there, the vast majority of them, seem to be wanting something else. They want to be somewhere else. They want to be doing something better. And I feel like that's something a lot of people can relate to. And it at some point when I was writing it, it dawned on me this is a town that's a vacation, vacation destination. People are coming in and out, coming in from great lives. They come to Wilson Island, they experience it and they love it. And then they leave and go back to their other great lives. And the people who are there who want something different, that's got to be sort of daunting and heartbreaking in a way to see people coming in and out. So Wilson Island starts taking on almost an adversarial role in that there are so many people who want to escape, but they can't for various reasons. They just can't get away from this place. And I like how that played into the isolation element. And that's what I was going for. And then, of course, when things really hit the fan, then the isolation becomes all the more terrible.
So let's talk about the townsfolk then a little bit. I think that basically you start with this sort of group of island residents. You have quite a few. I would say probably compared to most novels that I read, kind of a large ensemble of characters or island residents, if you will. How do you keep track of all those voices? Like how do you make sure each one is very distinct? And then there's a second part to that, but answer that part and then I'll come back.
So many notebooks and so many index cards. And at some point I was shuffling index cards and it was like riffling through them like I was playing poker, because I did take a lot of notes about each of the characters. And I start with sort of an archetype or, a key thing about that character's personality. In some cases, that's the main thing you get with that character. In other cases, it expands from that. But I would shuffle them around and I'd have them in front of me, and I would be lying. It would be disingenuous for me to say I never got them mixed up, because I definitely got mixed up a few times and had to go back and fix a lot of mistakes, because I would get tripped up on characters. And part of that was, that's not when I set out writing the story. The number of characters that we were dealing with was not my initial intent. I just fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with the idea of seeing more, in many cases, more oddball characters or more quirky characters. I just really fell down that rabbit hole, and I started layering more characters in. And so that wasn't my initial intent. And then it just got away from me a little bit.
What works though, Cullen, is that I was able to keep every single one of them super clear. I knew who each one was, and as we went back to them and followed up on their story throughout, it was easy enough to track. I never felt like I had to go back, like, wait, what was this character doing, and have to go back and reread anything. It was very easy to track.
Good. I'm glad to hear that it actually worked. That was, anytime I write anything, I'm always nervous if it's going to work. That's the fear. That's the thing that clenches me in the chest. Is this going to work? And I've been writing comic books and graphic novels for so long, and this being my first real, my first adult horror prose novel, that clenching feeling was all the more intense. So I'm glad it worked out.
It definitely worked. I'm curious. It's not the second part of the question. I'll get to that in a second, but I did think of something. As you're creating these characters, did you ever act them out? Did you ever pull out your phone and just do a character or make a voice? I work in film, so a lot of times when we're working on we're trying to figure out characters and stuff, especially I work in animation, so we do a lot of very early iterations of something, and what's his character like? What's he feel like? That kind of stuff. So.
Oh yeah, Rick, I got to tell you, I speak in the voices of characters. It's something I've done since the earliest days of pitching and trying to write professionally. I just do it, and I'll sit and I'll sometimes I'll look in the mirror and I'll talk about characters or I'll talk out what they're saying. I'll recite bits of lines. Sometimes I'll put voices of characters from movies or whatever. I'll try it out in those voices. So yeah, I'm always badly,
I think you should put those on your social. You should totally pull those up sometimes and just throw them out and be like, "This is what I went through to create Willa," or whatever.
No. I don't think anyone ever wants to hear that.
I would love it.
Looking back in time, the first graphic novel I ever pitched to a publisher, to a real, we're pitching this to get paid and get this book out. my collaborator called me before we had the pitch meeting with the publisher, and he said, "Hey, Cullen, I got to ask you something. Don't get mad. Please don't do voices on this call because I'm so when I'm pitching these things, I'll just start talking like the characters are trying to, at least, and that would have mortified my friend there, and that was so I don't do those voices for others anymore. They're just for me,
Well, I for one would love it. So the other part of that question that I was kind of curious about as I was sort of writing it out, it was like, with all of these characters, is there a favorite one that you kind of leaned into? Maybe not one that you wrote the most for, but, you know, because I mean, I've certainly had characters that live on screen for 30 seconds, but they're some of the most iconic characters out there, right? So,
well, I mean, there were definitely characters that I didn't intend to be as important as they were. There's this character, the Warlock, in the book that I did not intend for the Warlock to have a big role, but I couldn't let him go. I had to, expand that character. Willa's friend Sarah in the book, she doesn't have she has a pretty important role, but page time wise, she's probably a little less than a lot of the other characters. But I really like that character, and that's a character I think to myself, we all deserve a friend like that. We all need somebody like that in our life.
I was very nervous for Sarah, by the way, because I was like, well, I'm trying to be spoiler free as much as possible. It's your book. You can spoil it as much as you want. I'm just trying to be sort of respectful of that. But there were moments where I was like, is that really her?
Yeah.
And then I mean, it's and then I was like, is she gonna make it? So it was just like I was really kind of worried for Sarah.
And it is a tough book to talk about, to be honest, because there are some big spoilers in this book that I don't like. It's hard to market this book because there are some massive spoiler moments that I don't want to give away in the as we talk about it usually.
Right. Yep. So, well, definitely the Warlock was one of my favorites as well. So I was like, oh, this guy is kind of cool. I love it. So it was fun. So it was great characters in this book.
Thank you.
I want to kind of come back to what you were just saying about writing and doing graphic novels and comics and stuff, and then writing this book, sort of this adult horror prose, sort of what that experience was like for you. Because I know that working in comics, working in graphic novels is very collaborative. You have a lot of people sort of involved in the process, very much same in animation. But when you retreat to the corner of your room with your laptop writing a novel, right, then it becomes, I think, at least in the beginning, it's very, very, I hate to use the word lonely, but it's very, like this, it's all about you. Right. And so what's that process like? How was that for you moving into that? Did it get harder? Did it get easier?
It was not easier. That's for sure. It was a little daunting. I don't know that I ever felt lonely while working on it, but what I did feel was this sense of the safety net being gone. When I'm writing a comic book, I've written some scenes in the past, and I'm like, okay, maybe that one doesn't sing to me as well as it could. And then I know the artist is going to just nail it and save the day. So if I write a scene that I'm just not quite sure of, the artist can come in and fix that, and through their amazing talent, make it better. I don't have that with the novel. With the novel, it's me. And so I had to try to make these scenes work. And I have the safety net of a great editor. But beyond that, it's me. And at first, that was a little crushing and it slowed me down. It got to the point I was like, oh, I don't know if I should even. There were a lot of doubt-filled days while I was embarking on that novel. But it was very rewarding. On the other side of that, it was very rewarding to do this and say, okay, this is me. This is what I like. This is what the kind of story I want to read and told in the way I want to tell it. And it's all me on the page.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. So throughout, like, what scene for you in this story do you think are you most excited for readers to experience or to come across? And before you answer that, I get to answer mine.
Okay.
And I have two.
All right, let's hear them.
And the first one is, we talked about already, the first chapter. That first chapter for me, I absolutely loved it because you took me down one path and then we did a complete hard 180 and ended up somewhere else. I think you hooked me from the first chapter, and that's what you want to do, right? And so I was in from the get-go. But then continuing the story of, we'll call him the Ripper, when we do the revelation or the reveal of who the Ripper is, you did that so slowly, so methodically, but at the same time, it was very fast paced, and how everything sort of went down, and the introduction of other characters. And it took place, I think, if I remember correctly, over 3 or 4 chapters.
Right.
And I loved it. I just was like, I love the way, like, if I were watching this as a movie, this is exactly how I'd want to envision it. So those were 2 of my favorite moments.
Those are good choices. I'll go, there are a couple, I'll give a couple of scenes that I really think about. And some of them are, it's interesting in a book like this. There's a real quiet scene where Willa and the Warlock are sitting at a kitchen table and just talking. And I like that scene a lot. And then there's a scene when things really go south in Wilson Island. There's a deputy that radios in to the station and is trying to explain what's going on, and is having difficulty explaining what's happening because of their state. And I really like that scene, and that's the one that I was like, oh man, there's something wrong with me, isn't there? I mean, I really have issues. I mean, there's a lot of it, writing it. I found I really loved writing those quiet moments, like, sitting at a kitchen table talking, or being in the office working. I just really, and that's really why I probably dug into them a little bit more, is I just liked writing that stuff. And I like that feeling of those quiet moments before you get sucker punched.
Yeah.
By whatever else is about to happen.
I mean, the kitchen table scene is a favorite of mine too. And another favorite we've already talked about is sort of those final moments with a lot of these characters throughout the book, and sort of what, like, the way that it's experienced, is pretty awesome for me anyway. I thought it was pretty great. So,
well, thank you.
So what's next in this universe, if you will? I feel like, again, being spoiler free, I think you kind of leave it open to interpretation there at the end. So I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about any thoughts on where it goes from here?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I can't start a story and not think about what the next stage is. How does it get bigger? Where does it go? How does it change? And this novel definitely ends in a place where it could continue. It would be a very different story, if and when it continues. But I'm okay with it ending where it ends. I'm okay with ending it and saying that's it. That's all that we're gonna, we're not revisiting this world again. So I don't know. I can tell you that the novel I'm working on now is not set in, or is not a sequel to this. I can't say it's not set in this world, because maybe it is, but it's not a sequel to Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World.
Got it. All right, I'll take it, but I gotta hope you do another one. So,
well, I'll never say never, because I like the characters, I like the setting, I like the world, so I want to do more. But also, I have other stories I want to tell.
And I will say this: the ending, the at the very, very end, the way it ends with the people who are in the scene and how it ends, I just absolutely, I literally screamed. I was like, yes! That was awesome. So I thought it was pretty great.
Well, good. And that I'll tell you, that wasn't the original ending of the book. That chapter was sort of after the book was written and I'd gone through a couple of rewrite phases. I thought I wanted to punch that ending up a little bit. So that ending was actually one of the it's the last chapter. It was the last thing I wrote, but it's also very, very, very different from what I had originally written in there.
Yeah, well, it worked. I mean, like I said, I was very happy to see who we saw in the end. I'm gonna leave it.
Sure.
Leave it at that. So, All right. The book is called Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World. It's available everywhere November 11th. And like we always like to say here at Quills and Chills, please support your local bookstore whenever possible. So, Cullen, how can our audiences find you online and on social?
So the easiest place, if you go to my website, I'm on all the social medias as Cullen Bunn. So super easy to track me down. The easiest place to get to everything is my website, CullenBunn.com. And I do a weekly newsletter that if you can subscribe to right from the website, that's going to give you all sorts of insight into what I'm working on and behind the scenes information and thoughts on the horror genre. And then on YouTube, I have a YouTube show that I just recently started called TheCullenoscopy, which is a deep exploration of the horror genre, where I'm joined by various people and we just talk about different horror topics. So it's all very easy to find, though. It's all under Cullen Bunn.
Perfect. I will include all of that on screen for the video version. I'll put it all in the show notes as well for everything else, and it'll be in the social posts when this go out. So
awesome.
Well, Cullen, again, thank you for your time. I appreciate talking to you today. I absolutely, like I said, it's a fun book. It was a great read. You had me from the get-go, and I'm excited for everybody to check it out. So
thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
All right, you guys, we'll see you next time on Quills and Chills. Cheers.